Hello and welcome to today's Lol Esports video where we're going to cover Season 12 and look back at the most common champion matchups that occurred throughout the entire season. If you missed my video yesterday, I went over Worlds specifically. Throughout all of Season 12, I've been making daily League of Legends content, so subscribe if you enjoy Lol Esports content. And I've went over each patch and I've made a video like yesterday's, and I went over a cumulative spring, a cumulative summer, included MSI, and like I said, Worlds yesterday. So what is this? This is everything. This is Season 12. We're going to go over the most common matchups, as well as some interesting things. I know you can't read this, but I wanted to fit it all on the board, and we'll go over some interesting matchups that were heavily lopsided, with not quite as large of sample sizes as what we see here. So, in top lane, we had 66 different top laners picked. That was the most diverse role in Season 12. Worlds had a lot to do with that. The most common matchup you'll see here, there is 100 matchups between Gnar and Gwen. We see Gnar versus GP at 65, Gnar versus Sejuani 58, and then we look back at Spring, 46, Jace versus Gwen, 44, Jax versus Gwen, Gwen being very popular in Spring MSI. We remember how broken Gwen was. Seems like years ago, but it was only 6 months ago. In 100 matchups, Gnar has the edge over Gwen 58% of the time. I like to think that this is a larger sample. All these stats, by the way, are the 4 major regions. This does not include minor regions. This does not include solo queue, champions queue, or any of that, or academy. This is the 4 major regions, highest level, LPL, LCK, LEC, LCS. Gnar Gangplank, 58% edge over Gnar. Gnar Sejuani is closer, Sej 53. 46 matchups between Jace and Gwen. Jace won 70%. That is a lot. So when we do this, we say, oh, well, sample size, it's pretty close, so it's pretty coin flippy, right? We're around, I would argue that Gnar versus Sejuani at 53%, coin flip, right? Remember, this is in a vacuum. This does not factor in jungle proximity, player diff, team diff, itemization, runization, things like that. Next year, I am thinking about making some changes to how I accumulate data. But right now, this is very basic. Does not take into account all those variables. That's why the sample size, the larger the sample size, may be the more telling of information we can get. Now, when Jace is winning 70% of the time against Gwen, I have a hard time believing that that's because of jungle diff, itemization, runization, and player diff and all that. It's because Jace into Gwen is a matchup that is heavily Jace favored to the point where Jace can thrive. That's at least the way I look at it. And then at 44 matchups, Jax versus Gwen. Jax won 52%, very skill-based matchup, one of the more fun matchups we watched during Spring. I really enjoyed watching LPL and LCK, and I think it was even at MSI as well. Jax versus Gwen was a fun matchup. I enjoy top laners that play Jax, Fiora, Camille, and champions like that. That's why I am a Bin fan. I know Bin plays a lot of Gnar as well, but we all know Bin's Fiora pentakill. I'm sorry. I guess I have my bias in that way. But, yeah, so in top lane, it's like that. And then a couple interesting matchups didn't occur as much that were heavily lopsided. Ornn, in 28 matchups against Renekton, had a 76% win rate. Well, Renekton does stink, right? Ornn, very safe counter pick to a lot of different things that can just kind of scale. Game gets to 40 minutes and it's going to win and be relevant throughout, no matter how hard it may lose lane. In 25 matchups, Ornn versus Aatrox over Season 12, Ornn won 72%. So into Renekton, Aatrox, it was very, very strong. More so because of what it can provide the team. In the jungle, we had 39 different junglers picked. World's helping that. Fiddlesticks, Kayn. Kayn had already been picked, I think. But early on, we had a Talon jungle. We had Kiana in the LPL. A lot of different picks. 135 matchups between Lee Sin and Viego. 117 Wukong Viego. 111 Lee Sin versus Xin Zhao. Viego versus Xin Zhao 97, and then we see a big drop off to Trundle Wukong at 67. Trundle obviously becoming a bigger deal in summer. This is a lot closer though, a lot more coin flipping in the jungle. It's not as, these matchups aren't as lopsided. Everything 53 or less. Lee Sin 53% edge over Viego. Wukong 53% over Viego. Xin Zhao 52, Viego 52, Trundle 52. It's all very close. I would argue it's borderline coin flippy. Now you look at it and you say, okay, well Lee Sin and Wukong both had an edge over Viego. Maybe Viego wasn't as strong as those two champions over the aggregate. Obviously, player diff, things like that play a role in why it is the way it is. Lee Sin, Xin Zhao, I remember there were moments that I would do videos throughout spring, and it was like a trifecta in the jungle. It's like, well, so it was rock, paper, scissors. This champ beats this champ beats that champ beats that champ. And it's like, okay, well, this is a triangle here of picking whatever you want to pick. And it almost became comical when teams would pick into the rock, paper, scissors and lose. And it's like, well, I know you think that it's supposed to go this way, but right now there's like a 60% win rate on this patch, 65% that's indicating this thing. And, maybe it's not working, or you are not smarter than you think you are. And, we saw a lot of different things in summer, Poppy, Vi, which we'll get into in a moment. But throughout, it seemed that a lot of people are always, Lee Sin seems to always find its way into the meta, even if it's weak. We even saw it at Worlds a bit, like it will be picked. Wukong, we even saw at Worlds, which was very patch dependent. Wukong was not in the meta for much of spring. Xin Zhao showed up big in spring, Viego throughout. Now, some interesting matchups in the jungle. We saw Wukong versus Lee Sin 32 times. Wukong winning 66%, so that was pretty heavily favored Wukong. 29 times Xin Zhao versus Volibear. Remember, we saw quite a bit of Volibear. I feel like the LEC loves picking Volibear. It is kind of weird. Xin Zhao won more than 2/3 of the time, which is pretty evident. Like, oh, wow, this matchup is not good for Volibear. We need to stop picking it or blinding it with Xin up. And then 21 times, this is the one that inspired me to do the extra bits. Vi against Viego, 21 games. Vi had an 81% win rate. Now, I'm sure people are going to go back and fact check on my stats, and maybe I don't have it 110% accurate. Maybe I'm missing one here or there, and a percentage point here or there. But I think that that is pretty crazy, right? Vi over Viego. Vi was extremely strong in summer on one patch against Viego. That there's only 21 matchups, but it was heavy, 81%. Why that was? I'm sure there are analysts that have an idea of why that is the way it is, but it is still pretty interesting to think about, especially because I am not a fan of Vi as a champion. I think that it stinks. So that's the thing. Now, mid lane, 59 mid laners. The mid lane meta, if you will, across the whole thing, you see the most common played is 67. That's tied for the 5th most in jungle. Around where support and bot are at, it's more so like the top lane, right? Gnar versus Gwen was literally a handshake that caused 100 matchups, but after that, it's very similar to mid. 67 times LeBlanc versus Ahri. You're going to see a trend here. LeBlanc versus Ahri, Lissandra versus Ahri, Victor versus Corki. We saw that boring meta we saw. Azir versus Ahri, and Sylas versus Ahri. A lot of Ahri. Ahri was a super strong pick. A lot of people like to rely on it and lean on it. Now, what I find interesting about this, there couldn't have been a draw. It was 67. Oh, you know what? It might have been within a percentage point. 34 divided by 67. 34 divided by 67 might be under 50.5, which would cause it not to round up. Either way, it's already on the board. So either that's supposed to be 66, that's supposed to be 51. Either way, coin flip matchup between LeBlanc and Ari. 57 matchups, Lissandra, Ari. Lissandra, slight edge, 54%. We saw Lissandra be a common counter pick to Ari. We saw it at MSI. We saw it throughout all of, actually, the split. Lissandra finding its matchups, LeBlanc into LeBlanc and Ari. 54 matchups, Victor versus Corky. Corky, 56%. Corky, obviously, late game scaler, like Victor. We saw that commonly in the LCK. 53 matchups, Azir, Ari, Azir 57%, and then Silas 52%. So Ari actually did not have a winning matchup in the former most common matchups, which is kind of funny because Ari was being picked so heavily, so prioritized. It's almost like people picked it long after it was nerfed, and that just caused them to lose matchups. It was like, oh, you're leaving Ari up? Well, I'm going to pick it. Well, that was like 2 patches ago, guy. It's not quite as strong as it used to be. So, it lost a lot of games. Now, the mid lane matchups that were lopsided, Victor into Ryze. Victor won 76% of the time in 38 matchups. Azir versus Victor in 30 matchups. Azir won 70, so you see a trifecta here between Victor, Ryze, and Azir. I don't know what Ryze versus Azir was. It wasn't lopsided enough for me to put here, and not as common as there. I do have it in my spreadsheet, but I'm not going to pull it up right now. Ari versus Ryze. This is the matchup. Ari had an edge, was into Ryze. 2/3 of the time it would win in 29 matchups, so we're looking at, 20-9 sort of deal, 19-10. Something like that. So strong matchup for Ari and Ryze. So yeah. So mid lane, it was the Ari show, and then when it wasn't, people still continued to make it. So bot lane, this was the handshake of handshakes. I remember in spring, and I remembered it throughout, and I think we even had one matchup in Worlds where somebody picked it. And that just was reminiscent of how boring spring was. People think Zeri Sivir was super handshakey and boring, and it was. But it is nowhere near what Jinx Aphelios was. Jinx Aphelios happened 380 times in Season 12 in the 4 major regions. That's a lot. Jinx won 54%. That's a large sample size. You could argue that Jinx actually does have the edge. 115 between Sivir Zeri. 84 between Zeri Jinx. So that you see that the summer meta was a little bit, different because Jinx is still there. Sivir Zeri Jinx. Saw some Twitch. 71 Kalista versus Aphelios. 62 Xayah versus Aphelios. 29 different bot laners picked. Definitely the least diverse role, but we could probably understand why. Sivir, 51% edge over Zeri. That is very small, 115 matchups. That's probably 2-3 matchups going one way. So you could argue it's coin flip. But what's surprising about that is that we think of Zeri as super, super disgusting and scary, and it is when it gets online. But against the Sivir, it was a coin flip. And that's a lot to do with the Yuumi that we'll get into. And we all know Yuumi is disgusting. So Zeri itself wasn't as strong as really it's made out to be. Into Sivir. Now into Jinx, 62%. So if Sivir's being banned, or you're not picking Sivir into Zeri, you're picking Jinx instead, you're kind of inting your face off. At least that's the way I viewed it in summer. Kalista versus Aphelios. Kalista 54%. Xayah versus Aphelios. Aphelios 53. So, you have this situation where Aphelios, Xayah, Kalista, kind of all trading under 55%. All very close matchups, could go one way or the other. In bot lane, the most common lopsided matchups, if you will. Lucian, Aphelios. Lucian would win 65% of the time. At Worlds, Aphelios got the edge over Lucian. We saw Nami get nerfed going into Worlds. Lulu got a little nerfed as well. But Lucian Nami was not as strong as it had been throughout the rest of Season 12 going into Worlds. Kesa Ezreal, very common MSI matchup. Kesa dominating Ezreal 70% of the time in 44 matchups. It's like 46 and 70 there. Pretty telling. KSA has the edge over Ezreal. It's pretty telling, and it's hard to deny that win rate and make an excuse for why it is the way it is. 18, so this is the smallest. Not a lot of lopsided matchups in bot lane. Over 65%, which was the threshold I had. 18 games between Zeri and KSA. Zeri would win 78%. Those are for the bold souls that probably let Zeri get picked and then did not pick a counter in the first rotation. They get banned out and they're stuck with, what do I pick in R4 or B4, you know, that situation. And, well, they would pick KSA and it did not do well. Support, 52 different supports were picked. Because we had such a handshake in spring, we had a handshake at support as well. Leona, Nautilus happening 160 times, very common. Engage, bot lane, we know, you know. Leona Nautilus is always going to show face. We saw the engage meta come back during Worlds play-ins, and then when the better teams got on the Rift, it went back to what it was at the end of summer with Enchanters. It just kind of is what it is. So Leona Nautilus 160 times, 72 times Nami Lulu. That was obviously from summer. 67 Nautilus Braum, 61 Nautilus Rakan, and then 61 Yumi Lulu from summer. So it's what? Nautilus, and then pick your poison. In spring, Leona, Rakan, Braum. And in summer, it's what do you want to take? Yumi, Nami, Lulu. Oh, all of them are banned. That's when we got weird things like out of the box things like Soraka towards the end. And Renata also being heavily banned, which is why Renata really doesn't end up on this board until the lopsided matchups. So at support, Nautilus 52% over Leona. I mean, coin flip. Nami Lulu, lopsided. Nami, so Lucian Nami, because no one's picking Nami without Lucian. 61% win rate over Lulu in a vacuum. Nautilus Braum, Braum 52. Rakan Nautilus, Rakan 52. So, I mean, Rakan and Braum 52% win rate over Nautilus. That's pretty small. Very coin flippy given its support. Yumi Lulu, Yumi 51%. Which is why this is the way it is. That's why the Sivir is the way it is. Because if you pick Zeri first pick, you're like, oh, well, okay, Sivir Yumi. Now you get Zeri Lulu. You know, like, that's what happened. Very, very commonly, that's what happened. So, that matchup is a lot closer than we give it credit for. Lopsided matchups at support. 30 times Yumi, Nami. Yumi would win 2/3 of the time into Lucian Nami. That's a lot to do with the Zeri meta. Sivir, when Sivir Yumi is like, oh, well, let's pick Lucian Nami and do it. Well, it's not really going the way you think it is. I don't know why you're reading it the way you are, because it doesn't make any sense. Yumi Nautilus, Yumi 65%. Obviously, if you're picking a ranged into an engage, you're in for a world of hurt. And then 22 times Renata over Lulu. Renata would win 65%. Renata was very strong, would get banned a lot. So it had an edge against Lulu. I mean, definitely an interesting champion in the support role that we saw throughout the entire split. So yeah, so that's season 12. I don't know if this video is longer than yesterday's. I feel like it might not be, but that's okay. Down in the description, there are 3 links: Twitter, Discord, YouTube memberships. Twitter, follow me there. Discord, join us. YouTube memberships, $3 a month. Supports me, keeps the channel alive so I can continue to give you daily League of Legends content. That would be awesome. At $10 a month, you get the badge. You get a $3 a month. Plus, NFL, American football content. Tomorrow, there will be an NFL video out in the members only section. So, yeah, so like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it if you do enjoy it that much. Tomorrow, we are going over the LEC and what the teams look like going into free agency. I understand the LEC is a cesspool of leaks. That is disgusting, and I'm going to pretend like I really don't. I mean, I'm going to treat all rumors equally on the board that I go over, and I don't care, sources, this or that. There's a ton of tampering going on in the LEC. I can't believe that it's allowed. It is mind-boggling that it is allowed, but I digress. That'll be for tomorrow. So thank you for watching, and I hope you come back for more content.